From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Anybody who questions this gut-wrenching decision that we were forced to make by a group that had proven in the past that they were wanting to create chaos on the platform and were going to make it even more chaotic had we let it happen.
Cisco's BART subway system is on the defensive for cutting off underground cell phone and mobile internet service at 4 stations in an attempt to foil a protest over the shooting death of an unarmed homeless man by subway police. Then we'll look at digital dissent. The hacker activist group known as Anonymous was quick to respond.
Today, we've seen America come alive. In the Bay Area, we've seen people gagged, and once more, Anonymous will attempt to show those engaging in censorship what it feels like to be silenced.
Anonymous hacked into the subway system's website. We'll speak with an anonymous member of the Anonymous Collective. We'll also look at the ethics of hacking worldwide. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Iraq suffered its deadliest day of the year Monday, with some 89 killed and over 300 injured in dozens of coordinated attacks across the country. Militants used car bombs, roadside bombs, and shootings to carry out the violence, targeting Iraqi security officials and civilians alike. In the final reported attack late Monday night, gunmen dressed in military uniforms pulled 7 people out of a Sunni mosque south of Baghdad and shot them all execution style. No group has claimed official responsibility for the violence, but a recording posted on an al-Qaeda-linked website last week indicated the group was planning a wide-scale attack. The assaults mark the first major act of violence since Iraqi officials announced they would begin talks on keeping U.S. forces in Iraq beyond the scheduled withdrawal date of December 31st. The Syrian government has intensified its assaults on the port city of Latakia, bringing the death toll to an estimated 34 people over the past 4 days. Witnesses say the army has rounded up civilians in a sports stadium and stripped them of IDs and mobile phones after ordering residents to evacuate their homes. The siege of Latakia began Saturday with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces using snipers, tanks, and in a new tactic, Navy gunships. The United Nations says more than 5,000 Palestinians fled a refugee camp in the city to escape the violence. UN spokesperson Christopher Gunnis said aid workers called on Syria to halt the attacks and provide access to the camp.
We are extremely concerned about the situation in Latakia, where more than half the refugee camp, between 5,000 and 10,000 people, have fled. They fled incoming fire from gunboats, they fled incoming fire from the land, and security personnel told them to leave. We're saying to the Syrian government we want immediate humanitarian access to tend to the sick, to tend to the dying, and to get our own programs up and running. The eyes and the ears of the world are watching. There's diplomatic pressure, there's political pressure. I would like to think there's some kind of moral pressure, because this fighting, this attack on a refugee camp has got to stop.
Meanwhile, Syrian tanks have entered the flashpoint city of Homs, causing what local witnesses are calling a state of siege. The foreign minister of Turkey has again urged the Assad regime to end the violence, calling the plea the final words from the Turkish government. Human rights activists estimate around 2,200 people have been killed since the Syrian crackdown began in mid-March. Opposition fighters in Libya have seized strategic positions outside the capital, Tripoli, intensifying pressure on the regime of Muammar Gaddafi. The rebels have cut off the major oil and diesel fuel pipelines to Tripoli and captured 2 key outlying towns. In response, Gaddafi's troops shelled the coastal town of Zawiya, which rebels now control. A senior Libyan security official unexpectedly arrived in Cairo Monday, signifying a major defection for the Gaddafi regime. U.S. officials, meanwhile, say Gaddafi's forces have fired a surface-to-air Scud missile for the first time in the ongoing conflict, but it failed to hit its target. The developments inside Libya come as representatives of the Gaddafi regime and the rebels continue to hold talks in neighboring Tunis. The United Nations envoy on Libya, former Jordanian Foreign Minister Abdullah al-Khatib, flew into Tunis Monday to join the negotiations. President Obama's kicked off a 3-day bus tour aimed at promoting his record on the economy amidst high unemployment and fears of a worsening recession. At a town hall-style event in Iowa, Obama said he would present a new plan to boost the economy next month.
I'll be putting forward, when they come back in September, a very specific plan to boost the economy, to create jobs, and to control our deficit. And my attitude is, get it done. And if they don't get it done, then we'll be running against a Congress that's not doing anything for the American people, and the choice will be very stark and will be very clear.
Speaking earlier in the day in Minnesota, Obama criticized Republicans' steadfast opposition to tax hikes on the wealthy. Obama cited an opinion piece from billionaire investor Warren Buffett in support of the tax hikes.
I put a deal before the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, that would have solved this problem. And he walked away because his belief was we can't ask anything of millionaires and billionaires and big corporations in order to close our deficit. Now, Warren Buffett had an op-ed that he wrote today where he said we've got to stop coddling billionaires like me.
President Obama's bus tour comes as his approval rating has fallen below 40% for the first time. According to a new Gallup poll, 39% of Americans approve of Obama's job performance, while 54% disapprove. Both figures represent the poorest marks Obama's received since taking office. The Republican race picked up steam Monday with the latest entry, Texas Governor Rick Perry joining rival candidates on the stump. Perry addressed supporters in Iowa, while Mitt Romney spoke before a crowd in New Hampshire.
I know what this country needs, and we need to get Americans back working. We need to be able to create an environment in this country where anybody that wants to work can find that job.
I wish the president were in Washington calling back Congress and dealing with the challenges we have. I don't know that he has a strategy now, or whether he basically thrown up his hands and is just hoping things will get better. In some respects, I think he's more concerned about keeping his job than spending the time necessary to help Americans get their jobs.
The United Nations World Food Program says it's investigating the theft and sale of food intended for famine victims in Somalia. The Associated Press has uncovered 8 sites in Mogadishu markets where thousands of sacks of food stamped with the WFP logo were being sold. According to the UN, more than 3.2 million Somalis are in need of food aid, nearly half the country's population. The ongoing crisis has already claimed the lives of 29,000 Somali children under the age of 5. The presiding judge in the trial of ousted Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has ruled the proceedings will no longer be televised. Without explanation, the judge declared the cameras will be turned off in order to, quote, protect the public interest. Mubarak's trial was on its 2nd day. Egyptians had previously been able to see the ailing Mubarak appear in court lying on a gurney within a metal cage. Mubarak is accused of corruption and ordering the killing of civilians, while his sons Gamal and Alaa face corruption charges. Family members of those killed in Egypt's uprising and critics of the Mubarak regime have denounced the court's ruling.
When they were arresting us during the revolution, we would be put on trial within 24 hours. So why has he not been sentenced yet? Why has he not been sentenced after 6 months? Why? Because he's still the president, just like he was, and he will remain so. He will remain president for 6 more months until the regime is finished.
In Israel and the occupied territories, at least 1 Palestinian has been killed, 5 others wounded in a series of Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. 2 of the victims were left on life support. Israel has said it's responding to rocket fire that's increased from Gaza over the past month. But Palestinians have accused Israel of escalating attacks on the occupied territories in order to subvert the Palestinian statehood bid at the United Nations next month. The Israeli government, meanwhile, has approved a new settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank. The settlement of Ariel will receive nearly 300 new homes in the largest housing project in a single settlement since Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took office. 100 of the apartments will house Israeli settlers who left the Gaza Strip 6 years ago. Meanwhile, in Israel, lawmakers have interrupted a summer recess amidst ongoing protests against economic inequality and the high costs of living. Tens of thousands of people continue to take part in the protests across Israel.
between rich and poor really got wider and wider, and I think right now people really feel frustrated because they're working, they work in very respectable jobs, but they don't get enough to live their lives and to raise their children. So I think this is the uprising, this is where it comes from.
I believe it might get a bit more violent towards next week if we don't start seeing the government taking us a bit more seriously.
A new report from the United Nations says violence in Sudan's South Kordofan region in June may have amounted to war crimes or crimes against humanity. The Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Kyung-Hwa Kang, said more investigation is needed.
The main findings of the report are serious violations of human rights in terms of indiscriminate attacks, extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, illegal detentions, and looting of property. We have cases that would point to, if substantiated with other patterns that point to the same kinds of crimes against humanity.
The oil giant Royal Dutch Shell says it spilled 54,600 gallons of oil into the North Sea from a rig off Scotland's eastern coast. The company announced the spill from the Gannet Alpha oil rig last week. Shell officials say they expect the oil to be dispersed by the ocean's waves and do not anticipate it will reach the shore, but conservationists are warning it may threaten sea life. Global food prices are once again on the rise, stirring fears of further unrest in poor communities worldwide. According to the World Bank, food costs were 33% higher last month than 1 year ago. The bank's Food Watch price report says prices are now near the record levels that sparked riots in 2008. In Arizona, rains washed away a portion of a fence along the Mexico border, affirming predictions made by the barrier's environmental critics. Built between 2007 and 2008, the fence at the Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument has been criticized for dividing wildlife populations and habitats and diminishing the range for endangered animals by as much as 75%. Experts predicted the barrier, which forms an unnatural dam during rainfall, could present a risk to its own structural integrity. On Sunday, it took 2.5 inches of rain to wash away 40 feet of the fence. Latinos and immigrant rights activists are holding a national day of action today to oppose the Obama administration's recent decision to expand the controversial immigration program known as Secure Communities. Secure Communities requires local police to forward fingerprints of every person they arrest to the Department of Homeland Security. In recent months, the governors of Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York have pulled out of the program. But earlier this month, federal officials announced the program is not voluntary and that local governments cannot opt out. Rallies are planned in Atlanta, Georgia, Boston, Massachusetts, Charlotte, North Carolina, Houston, Texas, Miami. The activists plan to deliver thousands of petitions to President Obama's national campaign headquarters in Chicago. And Google has launched a major expansion into the wireless market. On Monday, Google bought Motorola Mobile for $12.5 billion. The purchase was Google's largest to date. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.